Okay, we're on. So it's TeamStrub Day 64. I am in my 29th state of the summer, and I'm thrilled to be here at Youth Emergency Services and Shelter, right? Got the name right?
Correct.
And I'm here with Kristin, so thank you so much for joining us this morning, Kristin.
Thank you for coming.
And would you like to introduce yourself to the world and say hello?
Definitely. My name is Kristin Huinker. I'm the development manager here at YES. That involves basically fundraising, so grant writing and reporting, working with our donors, planning events, marketing communications, all of the above.
Great, great. Tell us all about the organization.
Yeah, how much time do you have?
We got about 10 minutes.
Okay.
We'll go through it all.
We'll do the Reader's Digest version.
Great, great.
We are the state of Iowa's largest emergency youth shelter.
Yeah.
So the shelter component is the cornerstone of what we do. So we provide emergency shelter and crisis nursery care for newborns through age 17, both boys and girls. On average, we'll serve anywhere from 800 to 1,000 youth in our shelter every year. And these kids come to us because home is not a safe place. So these are kiddos who have been involved in some sort of trauma situation, whether that is abuse, neglect, so where parents aren't able to care for their needs, substance abuse in the home, parent incarceration. Lots of those really icky situations are why kids are here.
Wow, okay. And so the kids actually, so we're here in the library. We'll talk about the library in a minute, but a lot of, you have about 60 kids that are housed here
Yes.
at the moment, and that number sort of comes and goes. But interestingly, there's more to the facility now. You guys just recently opened up, I guess, some new wings to the facility. How did that work, and talk about that?
Yeah, so the agency, just a little background history, the agency has been around since 1973, so we're just over 40 years old. So we've been around for a while, serving, thousands of kids every year through our various programs. But the biggest thing we noticed in the last 3 years is that we were turning away more children than we were serving in our shelter, and that's just a big problem for a city like Des Moines. So what we did is we decided to open up a new space of the shelter. So we added on to the existing shelter. It's a 19,000 square foot addition, $4.2 million capital campaign that we are very close to finishing. And what it did was the first floor added 32 new bedrooms, so it moved our licensing capacity from 60 to 92. And then the second floor is all of this extra space. So the library that we're in right now is on the second floor. We have brand new classrooms. We have spaces dedicated to music therapy, art therapy, play therapy, volunteer room, because we do have a lot of volunteers that come in to spend time with our kids. So this was a space that was very intentional. It's very nice and new, and we hope to keep it that way. But it was something, it's something that unfortunately was needed. Our CEO, Steve, likes to use the term that our business is booming, and if you're a corporation, that's a great thing to say, but when you work in the kid business, that's not good. So what we did was we expanded because we weren't meeting the need.
Great. So I had a chance to walk around this morning with Amanda, and she mentioned that there's no limit on how long a kid can stay here, which I thought was very interesting. Some of the other shelters that I visited this summer, they really try and lay out a plan that says we need to move you along. That sort of keeps people moving and everything. So what's the philosophy behind that, that there are some kids here that are here for years? Yeah,
so we do not have a term limit. So even though our name has emergency in it, we would love for that to be the case for every situation. Our average length of stay right now is 46 days, so a month and a half. Now, no, that's a very large bell curve because we have kids who are here for a couple hours, and then we do have kids who are here a year or longer. So we have outliers, but the average is that 46 days. And for an emergency shelter, that's a long time. Ideally, it would be 2 to 3, maybe 4 or 5 days tops, and we're far beyond that. And one of the reasons behind that is because we want kids to know that they can stay here as long as they need to. So our business is based on what's going on in the community. So we have kids who come to us from the foster care system, who come to us from other facilities throughout the state of Iowa. There is a network of similar facilities like us, and there's a lot of transparency and working together to make sure kids are where they need to be. But because of that, and because of the great need, YES basically becomes the waiting room for those kids. So if a kiddo's trying to get into a facility in, say, Northeast Iowa, if they're full, that means that child has to stay here longer. Or if we have children who are waiting for a foster care placement, well, there's not a huge amount of foster families here in the state who can take a lot of our kids with their mental health needs and their behavior issues. That would require that child to stay here longer.
So when you look at the analytics and the data year after year, is that one of the annual goals? You said 46 days average stay. Are we trying to crunch
We're
that
trying
down?
to, yep. So the goal with, that was one of the goals with the expansion, was to try to drop that. So really focusing on a population that we call non-system or respite kids.
Yeah.
So these are kids who are here 2 to 3 days. So when families just need a break. So they're not involved with the system yet, with Department of Human Services or juvenile court. Abuse hasn't happened yet, but it might happen. So when you think of families who are dealing with just legitimate crises that you can't prepare for, loss of a job, a sudden death in the family, these are all very highly traumatic situations that can happen to families that might lead to abuse of a child or neglect of a child. And so if we can prevent that from happening, that really is the goal of Yes Services and what we were founded by in the 1970s. But what we're seeing is the need is so high for those kids who have already experienced the abuse, the trauma, the neglect, that we can't always serve those families who are trying to prevent it from happening.
And the kiddos, as we're calling them, require a lot of attention.
They do.
So, 60 kids, we'll say roughly 60 kids now.
Mm-hmm.
How many staff members?
We have, right now we have over 160. So that number is also going to grow.
Sure.
We have, it's a mix of part-time and full-time staff. And when you look at our staff and the makeup, a lot of it is, college-age kids who are finishing degrees in the social sector. It's also those who have, master's level degree in clinical counseling, and we have a child psychologist on staff. So it is a good mix of people who work here.
So 160 staff members, but the place wouldn't run without volunteers.
Oh, yes.
So talk
100%.
about the role of volunteers here.
Yeah, so we on average have about 1,000 volunteers a year that spend their time here with our kids, and I wish that number were 10 times that amount, because we need more. When they're here, they are usually working one-on-one with the kids. So our staff are still considered, the rule enforcers, and they're the ones that are providing the structure. When volunteers come in, it's truly to create that relationship, so that trusting, healthy relationship with an adult, because so many of our kids have been disappointed by every adult that has ever come into their lives, that they need to know that these volunteers are spending their time, that they don't have to be here, that they're not required to do this, that they chose to spend their time with our kids. And our kids notice that. When you call them by name, that is a huge thing, that most of us, hi, I'm Kristin, is no big deal. And if you were to call me that, it'd be, no big deal. But for our kids, when you remember their names and you know their stories, that is huge for them. So volunteers, they spend time with our kids. They play games. They go to the gym. They take them to Iowa Cubs baseball games. They go to the science center. We do have some that will help us with the facility as far as keeping it nice, because these kids deserve to live in a nice, well-kept place, because this is their home. But we do try to get the volunteers to spend as much time with the kids as possible.
And you guys think a lot about the specificity of the need in Des Moines. Of course, I'm traveling across the country. I've seen needs of all different types, but here in Des Moines, it seems like this is a major issue. Is there any particular reason why, and how are we addressing that as a community? Yeah,
we're just here specifically in Des Moines, but it's something we're seeing across the state of Iowa, and again, I wouldn't be surprised that this is happening across the country too, as we're just seeing the increased instance of abuse happening against children. And I don't know if it's just because it's a higher report rate. We're not really sure what's causing it. We're just noting that the numbers are higher. So what we call it here in the state of Iowa is a CHINA, a child in need of assistance. So that is the signifier that something bad has happened to that child. So it's the abuse or it's the neglect. Something's happened to that child, and that's why they've come to our attention. Those numbers are growing, and not just incrementally. I mean, they are skyrocketing. And Yes is really one of the only places that can care for those kids without them having to go to a hospital psychiatric unit or detention or other facilities that are highly restrictive and don't have near the support systems that we do here at the shelter. So those numbers are growing. One of the icky situations that I will bring up, because it does hit us here, the numbers aren't staggering, but they're happening, is domestic minor sex trafficking. So here in Des Moines, we are at the intersection of Interstates 35 and Interstate 80, which are two very highly traveled interstates throughout the country that converge here in Des Moines. And so we see girls who have come to us who are victims and survivors of that. And at that point, it truly becomes just getting them out of the cycle. And that can be a very challenging time for them. Because of the trauma bonds that they've developed. We have specific counselors who work with those youth, assessments in place so that we can identify them as quickly as possible. But that is kind of one of the topics that we don't always like to talk about, but we need to talk about, because it's happening here in Des Moines and it's happening across the country.
What is the pathway to completing this expansion plan here? I mean, how do we, I got the sense we hope that some of these areas would be open already.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we're here nearing the middle of July.
Yep.
So what is the strategy here? I know we'd had a duck derby a few months ago.
Mm-hmm.
So is there another duck derby coming? What are the ideas to get these kids into the facility?
Yeah. So with the expansion, when I mentioned we opened those 32 bedrooms,
Yeah.
we opened the first 8 of those 32 on April 1st, and within 4 hours they were full. So pretty obvious that the need is there. The issue that we ran into is it costs the agency anywhere from $100,000 to $250,000 to open one of those units. And so we can't just do that overnight from a funding standpoint and from a staff standpoint, because it's adding 12 to 15 staff as well. So the plan is hopefully to open that next set of 8 at the end of this calendar year, assuming that funding and all of that is put into place. And all of that is because this space that we're sitting in, this expansion, the opening of the rooms, is all private funded. There is not a penny from the state or from the county or government funds in this space at all. It was all privately funded. And Des Moines is a very generous philanthropic community. Our donors are amazing, but there's just not enough of them because there are so many great organizations here that we're starting to get stretched as far as what we can ask our community to do. So things like the Duck Derby, which raises about $300,000 for us. We do that once a year. I would love to find another fundraiser in the off season that can provide that much funding for us, but it is always going to be that struggle of making sure that we are providing the right care for the right kid at the right time, but also we need to be smart about that as well. So there's always, due diligence on our side to make sure that we're making decisions that are right for the agency, but especially right for kids.
It's really difficult to see when you take a tour this morning, and Amanda showed me, through some of the rooms, okay, here's the kids, and then here's the empty rooms that are ready.
Mm-hmm.
You just need the funding
Mm-hmm.
to get it done.
Yeah.
So where can people go online to read more about your organization
Yeah.
and consider, either becoming a volunteer and or maybe
Mm-hmm.
becoming a donor?
Yeah, so if you visit yesiowa.org, that's YESSIOWA.org is our website. We're also on social media, so if you search, you actually do need to search out Yes Youth Emergency Services and Shelter on Facebook.
Gotcha.
We don't have the shortened version. Twitter, it's Yes Iowa.
I can help you with that Facebook thing.
Awesome.
We'll get that done before I leave here today.
So we're on all those different social media channels, but the website is the biggest. And always just our phone line. So we do have a phone line that is staffed 24/7. All of us staff might not be here to, as far as, plugging you into a volunteer opportunity directly, but we always have someone at the phones, 515-282-9377.
Great. Let's ask you, what do you love about living in Iowa? Are you from here?
I am, yes,
Okay,
born
so
and raised.
tell us what is so wonderful about living in Des Moines.
It's God's country.
God's country.
I think it's a great space, Des Moines specifically, because you have the big city charm. So you have the amenities and things to do to keep you busy, but you also have this culmination of people just like you, so who grew up in a small farming town, who are 2 generations or 2 people away from actually having a cousin who lived in. So there's that connection between the big city and the small town life that just converges really well. But that's not to say that Des Moines also doesn't have its issues. So working at an emergency youth shelter, I'd rather not. There's other jobs that I wish I could do that
Sure.
we don't have places like this. Des Moines is a great city, Iowa's a great state, but there always is that issue of what's happening to kids, and that's what keeps us going.
And this is a college football state.
It
So
is.
I've heard.
Oh yeah.
Apparently that's the big thing
Oh
here.
yeah.
Well, Kristin, again, thank you so much.
for
This
coming.
has been wonderful. We're going to snag Kristin for some Snapchat questions here.
Mhm.
We'll get it all done. We'll get you a shortened Facebook URL before I leave. I
Awesome.
promise.
That would be awesome.
And check it out. So Strub on Snapchat, Instagram, we'll have pictures from around the facility. It's really been a wonderful experience so far today, getting a chance to meet with the kids and everything. So really glad to be here.
Awesome. Thanks for coming.